This next topic comes from neurosciencenews.com, and it says after 15 years in a vegetative state, nerve stimulation restores consciousness. Researchers have been able to restore consciousness to a patient who has been in a vegetative state for 15 years. The groundbreaking study utilized the vagus nerve stimulation to help restore consciousness to the patient. A 35-year-old man who had been in a vegetative state for 15 years after a car accident has shown signs of consciousness after neurosurgeons implanted a vagus nerve stimulator into his chest. The findings reported in Current Biology, which is a publication, on September 25th show that vagus nerve stimulation, a treatment already in use for epilepsy and depression, can help to restore the consciousness even after many nerves in a vegetative state, or many years, even after many years in a vegetative state. The outcome challenges the general belief that that disorders of consciousness that persist for longer than 12 months are irreversible, the researchers say. After 1 month of the vagal nerve stimulation, the patient's attention, movements, and brain activity significantly improved. The man began responding to simple orders that had been impossible before. For example, he could follow an object with his eyes and turn his head upon request. His mother reported an improved ability to stay awake when listening to his therapist reading a book. After stimulation, the researchers also observed responses to threat that had been absent. For instance, when the examiner's head suddenly approached the patient's face, he reacted with surprise by opening his eyes wide open. After many years in a vegetative state, he had entered a state of minimal consciousness. The findings show that the right intervention can yield changes in consciousness, even in the most severe clinical cases. The brain plasticity and brain repair are still possible, even when hope seems to have vanished, the doctor said. The doctor that was a part of this study. The researchers are now planning a large collaborative study to confirm and extend the therapeutic potential of VNS for patients in a vegetative or minimally conscious state. In addition to helping patients, Sarugu, the doctor, says that the findings will also help advance understanding of this fascinating capacity of our mind to produce conscious experience. This is such an interesting happening right now. I mean, in the world, because, I mean, shoot, our channel is even called the Lords of Consciousness, and so yeah, we even on a side. I mean, that's oftentimes more of a spiritual meaning, but there really is a scientific part of consciousness, and it's really important side. And for this is quite a breakthrough, and it's ironic because you and your wife are actually, Chance, you and your wife are actually doing a documentary that is similar to this story. So it's beyond ironic that I even chose to do this story with you, and then you told me about it. So why don't you talk about what your project is, and then how it correlates with these findings. I mean, or you take it however you want. You do one or the other first.
Well, I can't quite correlate it with the findings, but I guess I can correlate it in an abstract way. First of all, I'd also like to mention that I always hashtag consciousness, always. So
nice, man.
Okay, but seriously, I do. And this documentary is about our two friends, Colin and Finn, who live out in California in the Bay Area and in Idaho. They kind of move between places. And anyway, Finn got into a longboarding accident a couple of years back and was left in a completely vegetative state like this person, but his only lasted about a week. But when he came out of it, he was not able to do anything for himself, literally couldn't move or speak. And very long story short, 2.5 years later, our friend Colin has been by his side almost every day. There's been other caretakers as well, but essentially by working with this person and stimulating them on a heart level as well as a physical level, they've been really successful in bringing the old Finn back. And just the other day I got a message from Colin that they had gone on a 20-mile bike ride, and this was someone that was in a wheelchair for over a year after the accident, and only a few months after being out of the wheelchair is now riding a regular bike on a huge long distance like that. So I'm really excited and proud of both my friends for
That's a
how
beautiful
hard they've
story,
worked.
man.
We stayed with them for a couple of weeks, and we're going to be releasing a film about our experiences seeing his care, because Colin's just a really fantastic human being. And so the documentary is about the ability for someone who actually really cares about somebody else and spends as much time as they can muster, as much energy as they can put into it, giving that person all the pushing and everything they need to bring them back, no matter what it takes. That is actually what it takes. And whenever someone's left in a hospital bed and left alone for 15 years, I don't see much of a surprise that they don't wake up. Hospital care is, I'm not doing this as a diss to hospital workers or anyone that does care, that has a healthcare profession. It's a systematically designed sort of heartless endeavor, and it takes a lot of effort for someone to actually bring soul into an environment like that, honestly.
Right. So this, what your documentary, your experience with your friends out in California, and even this article, it's really like pointing towards what is consciousness. I mean, if it can go away in a sense for 12 years or 15 years in this case, where is it then during that time? And the fact that we can bring it back using science. What are the implications of this?
I am personally leaning towards the idea that consciousness is not generated by the brain. Actually, I'm quite convinced of the idea. Consciousness is not generated by the brain, but actually our entire energetic field, brain included, acts as a receptor for the consciousness that is pervasive and all-encompassing, and it's the sea of energy in which all things are enmeshed. That's consciousness. And so I think if you are stimulating the person's vagus nerve, which from what I understand is a big connector between the brain and the gut, and probably things in between, which would include the heart. All three of those areas of the body actually have neurons. The gut and the heart both have a lot of neurons in them. And it only makes sense to me that your actual feeling of what it is to be you is not only influenced by your brain state, it's influenced by your gut health and your heart health. It only makes sense to me why the ancients actually even thought that the heart was what was the seat of consciousness, not the brain. And so it may very well be that the brain is more like a switching station for different signals, so that your intentions are properly transmitted from the etherical, non-local field of consciousness that you actually exist in to this sort of walking Mars rover type thing.
I know, right?
Actually, no, it's not good to look at your body as just an object in that way, because the body itself, as a part of this consciousness field, it itself has consciousness too, which means that's where the reflectivity that comes in as being a human, and where we get our sort of illusory ideas of duality are coming in, is that we actually are a consciousness non-local to this body that's interacting with the field of consciousness that is this body.
Wow.
So
I love that.
So
Yeah,
this
I mean,
guy that's coming back online a little bit, I think maybe it could be that the connection between his brain and his gut and his heart is getting stimulated, because that nerve is getting stimulated, and maybe that's what's drawing him back in too, because maybe for whatever reason that connection was damaged and then began to atrophy. Perhaps the stimulation is sort of allowing it's like fixing the broken radio.
Yep. I think stories like this, studies like this, happenings like this are absolutely incredible. And even what's going on with your friend, it's not even that he's getting this vagus nerve stimulation, but he's getting other treatments of what it sounds like. Is there a lot of energy work that's going on with him, or?
Actually, no, it's kind of a straightforward medical treatment in some aspects. I mean, he's on certain types of medication and things that doctors would prescribe. What's really been effective, though, is the actual literal, like, loving him like a brother, the way that Colin has done, and other people too. But he responds. He's totally there whenever he was more out of it. If you were to try to pry it out of him, It's just these people that have this damaged consciousness transmitter, you could say, or receptor,
Mm-hmm.
because of the brain being damaged or the spine being damaged or whatever. They're, to me, what your soul or your spirit actually is, which uh, is sort of the thing that motivates you to do one thing or another. So it only makes sense to me that if you have some kind of damage in the receiver and you're not getting the full signal of yourself or your soul, then your motivation is going to be highly compromised. And actually, that also goes to explain why people that are in extreme unbalanced states and physically unhealthy have very little motivation outside of doing things just for baseline survival.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my awakening process um, was completely hand in hand with being able to actually generate original desires instead of programmed desires. And I don't know, getting in touch with your own intentions and choosing them on purpose is a great way to resonate with that field and draw in more of your own true soul and that which motivates you in general.
Beautiful, man. Brother, you have such a beautiful way of connecting the dots, man, and I'm really grateful for the work that you and your wife are doing, this documentary that you're putting out, and I'm really excited to be pushing
Shucks,
this.
man.
Shucks, man, is right, because you deserve it, because this is a really fantastic documentary that you guys are going to be putting out. This story is wonderful, and it's again, it's like putting a light on just the evolution of consciousness. It almost takes broken consciousness, a broken receiver, to help us understand what's going on, right? I mean, it's like when the TV breaks or the radio breaks back in the old days. You'd take it apart, and that's how you learned how to do it. When it breaks. And so these, in many ways, are these people that are having these experiences and are doing this for the rest of us, to help us understand. Man, it's beautiful.
That's really beautiful. You saying that definitely made a huge resonation to me. And I thought, if we are motivation and pure motivation whenever we're in non-physical form, which is our soul, which is our pure own personal self and desire and intention, then before we came into physical form, we must have done it intentionally. And also, some aspects of the experience are, according to a lot of researchers, especially with hypnotherapy and past life regression, they all point, the ones that I've read that seem legit, they all point to the idea that we had a great deal of choice in what it is that we were going to experience in our individual lives. So those of us who are actually going through those traumas like you're describing, they end up being greater healers and teachers to humanity overall than those who were taking care of them, in a sense. And
Mm-hmm.
they did, and they chose it on purpose, theoretically. So it's really advanced high level stuff if
Oh
you're a
yeah.
soul to, like, I'm gonna go in and just bust my head on some concrete and barely be able to function and teach these other people
Yeah.
what love is.
Yeah, it's kind of like I always say, Down syndrome children are just like these energetic lights in the world. I mean, you can't not smile when you're around a Down syndrome person, and they're just like these lights. They literally force people into their heart space. I mean, even
It's
the
almost
people
like
who are
the
not
condition
in.
is actually defense against programming and brainwashing and stuff.
Yeah.
The condition itself is like antibodies of love.
Yeah. Well said. I love it, man. Chance, thank you, brother.